Hi, welcome to Headline to Heartline. I'm glad you're here. Before we dive in, take a breath with me and picture this. A public figure you weren't sure about at first, who slowly earned your trust not with big speeches, but with small, steady acts. Hold that thought. Because at 75, King Charles is trying to do exactly that. Build trust in a quieter way, in a louder world. I still remember watching those first walkabouts after the Queen passed away. The flowers, the handshakes, the faces searching his face. It hit me then. People weren't only looking at a new monarch. They were measuring him against a memory. Since then, something subtle has happened. The early sympathy has faded, yes, but many Britons now describe him as competent, conscientious, and more comfortable in the role than they expected. Recent polling backs it up. A majority say he's doing a good job, even if younger people remain skeptical and the monarchy itself faces long-term headwinds. That's the paradox of his reign. His personal image can improve while the institution's appeal is tested by a new generation. Let's talk about the person who most reshaped that image, Camilla. For years, her name triggered strong feelings. The story felt fixed: controversy, comparison, caution. Then life went on. The marriage proved durable. The work continued. And the public conversation changed, not with fanfare but with familiarity. When people are asked today, many offer a middle answer about her, neither adoration nor outrage. Mixed views, yes, but less heat. What's clearer is her function. She shows up, she carries engagements, and she steadies the tempo of the reign. And before we go further, let me pause just for a second. If you're enjoying this reflection, please subscribe or share it with a friend. It really helps keep these conversations going, and it brings more voices into the mix. Now, quick context, because reputation never lives in a vacuum. Diana's legacy still frames expectations. She remains deeply popular, a benchmark of empathy and modernity. That memory sets a high bar for anyone, and it explains some of the caution people bring to Charles. But memory is not policy, and over time a steady record erodes old storylines. William and Catherine, for their part, are the monarchy's most popular duo. Their presence helps the whole brand. When they're visible, they make continuity feel real. And yes, the tensions around Harry and Meghan ripple through the narrative, especially among younger audiences. But the palace approach has been to keep calm and let oxygen go to local engagements rather than to feuds. Back to Charles, and to the question everyone asks, what's next? If you study how opinions shift, one pattern stands out. People reward what feels useful, frugal, and non-political. That's the lane he's trying to stay in. A smaller public footprint, fewer grand gestures, more visits that feel practical, apprenticeships, heritage projects, community resilience, faith and interfaith work, and quietly as ever, the environment. He doesn't need to convince everyone that monarchy is essential. He needs enough people to feel it's not in the way, not costing too much, and still capable of soft power and continuity. I still remember the first time I saw him talk seriously about climate and conservation on television years ago, long before it was fashionable. He sounded earnest, almost old-fashioned, but he was early. That's part of his brand now, not trendy but persistent. You can roll your eyes at the rhetoric. You can also acknowledge the consistency. In a world of hot takes, consistency has a strange power. There are headwinds he can't charm away. The long-term trend is clear. Fewer Britons call the monarchy very important than a generation ago, and younger adults are noticeably cooler toward it. That's bigger than one man, but it shapes his choices. You won't see a rebrand with neon lights. You'll see what looks like housekeeping. Leaner operations, tighter spending optics, transparency that feels a bit more modern, and careful boundaries with politics. The crown survives by staying interesting enough to matter and boring enough to be trusted. Here's how a successful stretch could look. First, the service-first operating system continues. More substance than ceremony, more town halls than balcony moments. Second, the partnership model deepens. Shared appearances with William and Catherine that keep the future visible now. Third, the quiet but clear voice on long-standing themes, environment, heritage, faith communities, without crossing the political line. And fourth, a nudge toward the young, not through grand campaigns, but through proximity to what they value: skills, culture, local projects that feel tangible rather than theatrical. And yes, we should talk about the worry people whisper. What if health scares, family drama, or a tone-deaf moment blows this progress up? That's the risk in any royal story. The answer isn't a counter-scandal. It's deeper routine. The more the day-to-day feels dependable, the smaller the shocks. Think of it like this. If you can predict next Tuesday's engagement and it looks sensible and modest, the monarchy is doing its job. One more personal note before we close. I still remember the first time I saw a small moment from this reign that felt, for lack of a better word, human. It wasn't the coronation. It was a brief exchange outside a community center. No microphones, just a soft thank you to a volunteer who looked surprised to be noticed. It reminded me why some institutions survive, not because they are perfect, but because enough people recognize themselves in the ordinary parts. So where does that leave us? With a king whose image has warmed, a queen consort who has shifted from controversy to continuity, and a family whose future stars are already in frame. With polls that say good job, and a public that still asks, why do we need this? With a plan that isn't designed to dazzle, but to last. If that sounds familiar, quieter, steadier, more routine, it's because you're seeing the strategy. From headline to heartline, that's the road. Thanks for listening to Headline to Heartline. If this episode gave you something to think about, share it with someone who still misses the Queen, and with someone who isn't sure the monarchy should exist at all. That's the real conversation now, and it's where King Charles is quietly doing the work. Goodbye, and see you in the next video.